Dolls for the Dead. 1. In the valley of Nagoro, where the river slithers like a half-remembered lullaby and the trees tilt inward like old listeners, the houses still stand. Wooden, hunched, bowed with too many winters, their roofs mossed over, their windows blind, rusted bicycles dream in the weeds. Laundry lines sway with absence, the wind speaks no names. But if you stop at the bend before the footbridge, you might see them. A group of children beneath a tree, a man waiting for a bus that hasn't come in 30 years, a woman bent over soil that no longer yields. If you watch longer, you'll notice they don't move. The earth around them moves, the long grasses, the trees and leaves reacting to the movement of the air that pushes the clouds endlessly around. But the children never move. The bus never comes. They never get tired and go home. They never say anything or do anything because the people have been replaced with dolls. Hundreds of them. 2. Some call it the Valley of the Dolls. But it wasn't always so. Once, it was just a village. One of many tucked into the green pleats of Shikoku. Remote, yes, but breathing. Children screamed with joy. Grandmothers shouted from doorways. The school bell rang sharp through pine's sweet air. There was even a dam project once. The future seemed prosperous decades ago. Workmen, machines, muddy boots. Then silence. The young left first, they always do, to Osaka, to Tokyo, to Kyoto, for elevators and deadlines and ramen at midnight, for blinking screens and lives that felt important. They said they'd return, and for a while they did. Obon, New Year's, weddings, then fewer postcards that got replaced with emails and text messages or video calls. Then nothing. The old didn't leave. They had nowhere to go. They faded. They folded into the soil or into the rooms they'd always known. A slow vanishing one by one like lights going out across a map. 3. Tsukimi came back to Nagoro to care for her father. She wasn't young, not quite, but not old either, and watched the difference between her life in a city to being back in the village. When her father died and he was buried, she stayed in the same house she grew up in and slept in his bed. She planted a garden. The birds tore it up. She planted again. The roots didn't hold. So she built a scarecrow. It looked like her father, his cap because she used his clothes. It even had his hunched spine. She placed him where he used to kneel. Then she stood in the doorway and watched. The figure didn't move, but something in the air did. The emptiness blinked. She'd look at her father and think about all the closed shops, the gone or lost or fled, like she had. But these others, they would not come back. The cities had stolen them. She made another doll so her father wouldn't be alone. Then another. Now there are over 350. Some are ghosts with names: Mr. Tanaka from the hardware store, Aiko who sold persimmons, her math teacher with the crooked teeth, her childhood friend who wore her socks inside out. She dressed them in real clothes, stuffed them with straw and newsprint, painted eyes by hand. Do they have souls? In Japan, dolls are more than objects. They carry residue. There's a ceremony, Ningyokuyo, where old dolls are thanked, mourned, burned. It's said they absorb our breath, our touch, our worry. They remember, some say they gain spirits, others say they call them in. Tsukimi doesn't explain, but she bows to them. She murmurs greetings. She straightens their collars, adjusts their shoes. She listens. And yes, they weather. Faces warp, mould creeps in. One by one they collapse. She lets some fade, others she remakes. She knows the rules, nothing lasts, not people, not even ghosts. When she walks past the shuttered ice cream shop, she always slows. Inside, she's rebuilt it. 3 dolls at the counter, one mid-laugh, one with a cone melting into his sleeve. A 4th sits in the corner, a little girl with her knees together watching. It's Tsukimi, age 10. The scene is still. A memory caught mid-breath, a diorama with no glass, an ofrenda with no flame. 4. The last children in Nagoro were lavished with love. The entire village tried to keep them. Everyone wanted to teach them how to wrap mochi, how to thread a needle, how to gut a fish, how to strike flint. But the children looked at the mountains and saw fences they left, none stayed. So Tsukimi reassembled them. She placed them in their former places, on swings, at desks, in line at the shrine. She recreated mourning, she simulated laughter, she choreographed the village back to life. A museum of the recently vanished. 5. Tourists come now, not many because of the distance. They walk the paths, they speak softly, they take photos, some reverent, some amused. But they never sleep here. There is nowhere to stay. There is no shop, no cafe, just the dolls. Some visitors find themselves. A man glimpses his younger self crouched by a gutter, rolling a marble. A woman sees a doll of her mother waving from the porch. They don't touch. They don't speak. It's like walking through the afterlife if the afterlife wore polyester. Tsukimi lives alone. She says she's not lonely. But she still says goodnight to every room. She leaves a light on for the scarecrow. She sometimes dreams the village is speaking again, through footsteps, through doors creaking open, through laughter caught in the trees. She knows she is not building forever. This is not bronze, not marble. This is thread and cotton and newspaper, things already half decayed. But while she is here, the village still breathes. A girl raises her hand. A boy waits for a bus. A father tends the rows of an empty field. The wind stirs, nothing moves. Still something remains. 6. In the second winter, Tsukimi walked the whole village in one afternoon. She carried a basket on her arm and a notebook folded into her coat. The sun above was pale and indecisive, dragging long shadows over the cracked pavement. Her shoes tapped like an echo, trying to remember where it began. The shuttered school waited first. 24 children sat inside, frozen mid-lesson. She had made each with care, not smiling, not grinning, just attentive. One raised her hand, one chewed on a pencil she'd stitched from denim and twine. The teacher wore a necktie she found in her father's drawer. It still held the scent of dust and skin. At the river, 2 fishermen kept their vigil. One had slumped over the years, the other still looked proud, hands forever casting. She adjusted his hat, the shoulder stuffing had settled into his chest, like time bowing the spine. She made a note to fix it, then didn't. In the dead field, nothing had grown since the last child left. But she remembered running through it barefoot, chasing a dragonfly, her mother's voice calling her in for lunch. The field now was stiff and grey. Still, she planted a girl there, arms lifted toward a kite that would never rise. The thread was already unravelling. In her basket was one more figure, a man. Small-framed blue work shirt, pants hemmed by hand. He was meant to be Mr. Aiba, who once fixed shoes and sharpened scissors. Before he left for Okayama to live with his daughter, he told her, "You should stop all this sewing. It makes people uneasy." But she didn't stop. She sat him down on a bench outside the shuttered hardware store, tilted his head slightly, like he was listening. Then she sat beside him. "You look better here," she said. The sky turned the colour of ash. Streetlights blinked on, though no one had wired them in years. Far off, a single bird cried out, one note, sharp as a crack in porcelain. She imagined her father turning the soil, her mother humming, herself aged 6 drawing on the backs of receipts, getting the ears wrong. The dolls could not bring them back, but they could pin the moment where love once stood. And that, she thought, might keep the world from vanishing entirely. 7. The boy returned on a Tuesday. He wasn't a boy anymore. His hair thinned at the crown, his shoulders had learned to hunch in offices. He wore city shoes that tapped too loud on mossed stone. His daughter, 8, maybe 9, clung to his hand, her coat swallowing her wrists. A stuffed rabbit dangled from her other arm, one eye missing, its fur rubbed flat. He hadn't told anyone he was coming, maybe not even himself. It was the kind of turn people make after a funeral, or a quiet betrayal, or a long night staring at the ceiling, wondering where the time went. The girl pointed toward the ditch. "Papa, that man's not moving." A figure crouched there beside a plastic bag of oranges. The doll wore a rust-red windbreaker with a hole in the sleeve. His old jacket. The face was solemn, younger, caught mid-thought. "He doesn't have to," the man said. They walked slowly. The girl peppered him with questions. Why are they here? Who made them? Do they breathe at night? He didn't answer. Not yet. They reached the old school. He peered through the dusty glass. There he was again, younger, sitting straight, hand raised. His name still carved into the desk, in a boy's uncertain slant. At the front of the class stood the teacher, not just any teacher. Tsukimi. She had always been like that, quiet, still, like she could hear something other people couldn't. But this was only the doll of her, he knew that. He turned and saw the real Tsukimi on the bench outside, sewing a doll's hand onto a half-formed wrist. She looked up when she sensed him, and her thread paused. "You came back," she said. "Only for a day. That's longer than most." The girl pressed her nose to the glass, fogging a circle. The dolls stared straight ahead, unblinking. "She looks like you did," Tsukimi said, except louder. "She doesn't stop talking," he said. It was meant as a complaint. It landed like pride. They sat without speaking. The wind moved dry leaves across the road. After a time, he asked, "Do you think they remember? The dolls, the people they were made for?" Tsukimi didn't look up. "Maybe. But the ones who come back always. Pretend they don't." He didn't argue. She was probably right. His daughter came running, rabbit in hand. "Can we stay? Just a little longer? I want to see all of them." He looked at her, at the cracked sky, at the way the mountains leaned in like tired parents, at the way the dolls turned their silence outward, like windows that never open. "Just a little longer," he said. Tsukimi returned to her stitching. The wind changed direction, and the school bell, which hadn't worked in years, stayed quiet. 8. The festival was her idea, not the real one. That had vanished when the last children forgot the steps and the old men could no longer lift the lanterns. The drums went quiet first, then the paper wishes stopped appearing in the trees, then the food disappeared, one stall at a time, like teeth falling out. But Tsukimi remembered. She remembered the heaviness of her yukata, damp with sweat, the slap of sandals on packed dirt, grilled squid, fried dough, plum syrup, the cool sting of shaved ice. Her mother's hand pressing a coin into her palm, saying, "Go win something you'll forget by morning." So she made it again. One summer, she spent 3 weeks sewing yukata from old curtains, tablecloths, shirts no one would wear again. She strung lanterns between the trees, some flickered, most didn't. She placed 28 dolls in a circle near the shrine, some mid-clap, some caught in the turn of a dance. One held a fan painted with a red sun. One child carried a paper goldfish on a stick, its mouth forever open. The music came from a rusted speaker buried in the school's supply room. It skipped and hissed, but through the static came something like rhythm, like breath caught in cloth. An old man wandered in. He limped to a bench and sat, nodding softly, as if he too had once remembered something worth dancing for. A tourist followed later, young, wearing a camera like a badge. She gasped, took 100 photos and watched the movement within the stillness. Tsukimi was adjusting the sleeve of a doll caught mid-spin. She tucked a loose thread behind its ear, smoothed the shoulder, made it decent. The woman asked if she could bring friends next year. Tsukimi looked up. "If there's still a next year," she said. Then she turned back to the dolls. One had lost its shoe. 9. The rain stopped around mid-morning. Mist clung to the mountains like breath, unwilling to leave a mouth. Tsukimi set out with her basket, ready to change the scarf on the child by the bridge. It had faded in the winter sun, gone limp with moisture. She was halfway there when she heard voices. 2 women, speaking with the bright vowels of Tokyo, stood beside the bus stop doll. They were taking pictures, laughing quietly. "Look at her pose," one said. "It's like she's waiting for someone she knows isn't coming." The other crouched beside the doll and held out her phone for a selfie. Tsukimi stayed behind a row of camellia bushes. Embarrassment tightened her skin, though she knew they didn't see her. She had made that doll's coat too long. It puddled around the wooden ankles, made her look like a ghost child. The visitors moved on, toward the school. Tsukimi followed, unsure why. A crow landed on the playground fence, black against the grey. In the yard they found more dolls, children playing jump rope, one mid-leap, limbs stitched into movement, stuffed with rice husks and memory. She even put one in the window, one whispered, pointing towards the old teacher's room. The face behind the glass was one of Tsukimi's best. A careful frown, wide glasses, chalk poised in her hand. "Do you think she does this alone?" the other asked. "Or are there more like her?" Tsukimi turned away. Later that evening, she found a folded paper beside the jump rope children. A note. "We saw them. They are beautiful. We hope you are okay." No name. She didn't know if they meant the doll or the ghosts. She carried the note home and placed it in the drawer where she kept other things visitors had left. A hair clip, a coin from Germany, a business card from an art gallery in Kyoto. Tiny tokens from the outside, proof that something had passed through. She sat by the stove, warming her knees, and wondered if they would come back. Most didn't. Outside, the doll by the bus stop kept her watch. Alone. 10. There were only 27 people left in the village. Tsukimi knew them all. Some waved, a few helped her sew, others passed without a word. One woman, kind but firm, had told her it was wrong, that dolls could trap the spirits, that the dead should not be pinned to earth by thread and straw. Tsukimi nodded. She kept sewing. She saw them as something else. Not replacements. Not exactly. She walked through the old market square, empty now, and past a group of students she'd made. She had set up a food stall beside them, with real plastic dishes, hand-painted menus. One cup still held the stain of tea. She reached in and wiped the edge. She did not remember making one of the boys. He sat slightly apart from the others, hands folded, eyes of amber glass. He looked content, watching. She stared at him a long time. The face was familiar, but not one she had chosen. Maybe the dolls made themselves now? She didn't know. When you live with ghosts long enough, they start to dream too. 11. For a long time, Tsukimi only made the kind of people others could see. The smiling shopkeeper, the bowing teacher, the children mid-jump, mid-laugh, mid-sprint. Neat roles, public faces, the parts a town shows the world when it wants to look whole. But real life wasn't like that. Not entirely. It had stains. It had shouts behind closed doors and bad smells and secrets hidden under the stairs. She remembered them too. The man who drank plum wine until he pissed himself in the street. The woman who spat on her own front stoop and called it luck. The boys who set fire to a doghouse just to watch it burn. The girl who wore long sleeves in summer and never swam with the others. She had made none of them. She had made no lovers either. No moans, no arguments muffled by paper walls. No one bent over a kitchen table counting the rent, counting the pills, counting the months since the last letter. No one standing barefoot behind a curtain, watching the road like it might return someone. No one screaming, no one having sex, no one dying or dead. And she had made no one wanting to leave, on purpose. That was the part she couldn't bear. So the dolls never moved, they never wept, they never broke the rules. Their faces, once painted, never changed. But late one night, something pulled her from sleep. A sound, a feeling. The stove had gone out, the house was cold. She walked through it barefoot, not lighting a lamp. She opened the door and stepped outside. The village was silent, but wrong. A figure stood in the alley behind the shed, slumped, threadbare, one arm at an angle she would never allow. The face was hers, her stitching, her paint, but something had shifted. The mouth sagged, the eyes looked down. She didn't remember placing him there. Behind the inn she found another, a woman with her hands over her ears, sitting on the ground beside a cracked ceramic cup. Beside the school, a couple in a frozen embrace, one clinging too tightly, the other trying to pull away. And in the temple garden, beneath a stone lantern, a girl sat curled in a shallow basin, knees hugged to her chest, red threads spiraling down one pale arm like ivy. Tsukimi stood still for a long time. She didn't make these, or maybe she did. Maybe they had waited, hidden. Maybe they'd crept forward over the years, claimed their places in the dark corners, behind the curtains, under the stairs. Maybe the village was finishing itself. 12. She wondered then what would happen after she died, whether the dolls would remain where they were or if they'd shift again. Grow stranger, more true, begin to crack their smiles and whisper their own names. Maybe the village would not vanish. Maybe it would simply become honest. But she wasn't ready for that. In the morning, she carried a sack down to the alley behind the shed. She gently unstitched the man's bent arm. She brushed dust from the woman's skirt and rearranged her hands. She cut the red thread from the girl in the basin and gave her a new scarf. Yellow, soft, stitched with tiny stars. She placed each one somewhere brighter, somewhere visible, somewhere safe. They were back to where they were supposed to be again. 13. Then she went home and lit the stove, sewed a new child, painted a new smile, and told herself, this is enough. She didn't need the village to last forever, just to outlast her, just a little longer. Was it true or just a well-told lie? Tell us what you believe and why. We know many of you listen late at night, sometimes while drifting off to sleep. Maybe you're wrapped in polar bear blankets, deep in the Arctic dark. Maybe you're swinging in a jungle hammock, wrapped up like a snack. Or maybe you're alone in a quiet room, or so you think. Let us know where you're listening from, and whether this story kept you awake or gave you good dreams. And one more thing. If you know a rare or hidden place, a ruin, an old legend, a forgotten town, share it in the comments. Your suggestion might become part of the atlas. If you enjoyed wandering these forgotten corners, subscribe and join us again for another journey into the unknown.